All right, everybody, welcome back to a lifetime of conversations.
I'm
Robert,
Rob. I'm Rob. Sorry.
I beat him to it. He's Robert. I'm Dave. Yada yada. Lifetime of conversations. So today, I want to ask you, what do you think the biggest storage medium is? We had before we had floppy disks, right? And then now we have things in gigabytes and digital.
The cloud.
Okay, fair enough. But is there something bigger?
I don't know. The cloud is the biggest thing I know of.
Which, technically, yes. But there is one other thing. At this point, there's probably a few other things, but this one, I think, why I want to talk about it, it can be huge, and I think it will be huge because it goes back to what some of the stuff we've talked about in the past. So, data storage today is mainly held across data centers, right? So basically, let's just say in Kansas, underground, there's like 4 football fields worth of gigantic server computers just holding everyone's data. So when you send a picture, it goes to the cloud, Google uploads it, and the information gets sent back and forth, right?
Okay.
That's generally what the cloud is, okay? That's it. They're just data centers who trade
And we
information.
pay for it.
Right. But because you couldn't yourself hold that much amount of information, and it's actually easier.
And we trust them with it.
Well, for the most part, it is good. It does work. And it is relatively trustworthy, right? Oh, your mother. I just burned myself on candle wax. But when you look at it, one data center, right, just one, has the estimated equivalent of the energy demand of a small city.
Wait, what do you mean?
So to run one data center, from cooling to electricity to heating to infrastructure to all of it, has the equivalent of energy use of a small city.
For us to keep our shit.
Yes, right? And what is that shit? Mostly, I don't want to say mostly pictures, but pictures, video, documents, legal, all kinds of crap, right? Everything. People use the cloud for just about everything. So it doesn't matter what it is. You can just say it's important to everyone. Whatever your data and your information is important to you, and you want it safe, and you want it kept somewhere, but you don't want it on your computer. Because what happens if your computer gets it it falls in the river? Now all your stuff is gone. But on the cloud, we have it saved. But how much of that do you actually go back to?
I've thought about this a lot.
Oh, okay, fair, good. Because I think most people don't think about it until they think about it, which is really kind of funny. So it's estimated that all digital infrastructure combined emits around the same greenhouse effect as all the air traffic in the world. So just to hold all our stuff is the same equivalent to every plane in the world emitting greenhouse gas, right? Now, I'm not going all eco on this. It's not really about that, but it just goes to show how much energy and effort it takes to save our stupid pictures, right? And around 60 to 80% of it is cold data, which cold data would be exactly what I mentioned, things that you don't ever go back to. Like if you actually went into your cloud and started looking through it, you'd be like, oh shit, remember that? Oh wow, I didn't even know I had this in here. But you hadn't looked at it until you did. So it's technically cold data because you don't use it all the time.
Right,
It would be something...
like a picture of me holding hands with my little sister 20 years ago.
Right. And now that picture means something to you.
To me.
But you didn't know it was there until you looked, right? But the idea of cold data is mostly like, let's say, legal documents, old emails, text messages. Like, there's a lot of stuff that just gets kept forever.
Why?
Well,
why?
Whatever the reason, but that's the bulk of the cloud storage is mostly cold data. So now where I'm going with this is we talked about the biggest thing to hold information would be a server farm, right? The cloud, what we call. It's not. DNA. Literally DNA. Like encoding information, and there's nothing really that new. It's just the idea that we have now the ability these days to make it a reality in the next 5 years. Now, everything I talk about seems like it was science fiction to us when we were kids. We would never have thought that it would have been an actual possibility.
Of course not.
But now everything these days becomes science fact. Like science fiction of the past is literally our science future, and that's one of the things that I really do get excited about when I see these things, because people are like, but you can't do it now and it's really bad, right? Because it's new, it's crawling, it's ChatGPT 1, it's it's crawling in the dirt. Give it some time, and it's going to work. So the idea was proposed by Richard Feynman in 1959, actually, at one of his talks. The idea that we could do what nature does and cram all this information into a fucking nucleotide, because that's how genetics works. What makes your eyes blue, your hair blonde, your body type, your certain sets of personalities, all these things, your basic structure is crammed into this microscopic nucleus, right? If you stretch DNA out, it's only like, 2 meters, right? But in that, you could fit billions worth of data points.
Yeah, millions of miles.
Right, in the condensed form, because generally it's all scrunched up. So, and it was also proposed by a couple of Soviet physicists as well as a cybernetic expert around the same time, 1959. So they were thinking about this shit, but there was nothing they could fucking do about it. Nothing, like literally nothing. They could say, oh yeah, we could do this, but we can't. It's a good idea. We will be able to do it, but we can't do it right now. And everybody just was like, oh, yeah, and then we just forget about it until we can do it. So now, in almost every cell of the human body, let's say the human body, because it's different for different cells, bacteria, and different types of animals and everything, right? One individual cell can hold up to a gigabyte's worth of info. One. That's just one cell, and our bodies are filled with billions and billions of cells, right? Now, not every cell contains our DNA, but the ones that do, they're pretty prolific. I mean, your DNA's in your spit, your DNA's in your blood, right? And we produce that all the time, right? Our DNA's in our skin cells, and we lose those all the time, right? So the idea is there's plenty of DNA to go around.
Well, you have mitochondrial DNA, and you have
right. Oh yeah. There's more. Okay, my point is that there's more DNA that has more cells that have DNA that don't. So DNA strands, if unraveled, are the equivalent of 2 meters, but the codes that are used are basically like binary. Like binary works off of what?
Zeros and ones.
Zeros and ones. And we can somehow make an entire paragraph's worth of words come out of zeros and ones.
Of course.
Or numbers in general, right?
I went to school for that shit.
Right. I know. That's what I'm saying. You have a basic understanding. And this is, just for everyone listening, this is all really just a basic layman's term, surface level understanding
It's
of
math.
Right. But with DNA codes, it's ATGC, and they're based off of like color codes. They color code them just to make the numbers, the letters easier, right? And that's basically all DNA, pretty much the same way. So it's all the data on DNA is crammed into a cell nucleus, and it's over 100,000 times more than something like a 60 gigabyte memory card. Now, even in our time, 60 gigabytes, didn't even exist. A floppy disk had maybe 32 megabytes, right? And that was, 30 years ago?
Not even
right.
close.
It doesn't matter. I'm just saying, the number is drastic, exorbitant. So the idea that we could fit 100,000 times more on DNA, right, is sick to think of. So, and when do you think this started? Do you think, if you could take a guess, if you would think enough. So they proposed it. Feynman proposed it, and it was one of the scientists in 1959. When do you think they started messing with it again?
I think Richard Feynman didn't really care what we were doing in our classes.
No, this was just an idea he proposed. Yeah. It was like a biological idea. It was an idea. He's just a scientist, the way you think outside the box, ahead of themselves, far ahead of the future. But 1988, it was done, a novelty artist collaboration. They basically just stored 35 bits of data on encoded into DNA in the shape of a Germanic rune, right? It was just like a proof of concept type thing. that look, we did it. I mean, this is 1988. I can only imagine what that fucking took to do in 1988. Right?
Maniac Mansion.
Great game.
We went down into the basement. That's when we figured out who this motherfucker really was.
And it was Richard
It,
Feynman.
it was Richard Feynman.
But in about 2013 is when the breakthrough technology started making it possible to store any kind of data on DNA, which is 2013 is not that far. It's not that long ago. Like that's roughly just over 10 years. Not that long ago, the fact that we can now take audio, data, and photos and store them inside DNA and be encoded out to actually read it. It's phenomenal. So you had mentioned it before. Remember you said like what happens if, and this is why I bring it up. You said like what happens if the world ends and all of our knowledge is gone, right? Like we don't have this computer to read this
It's happened before.
Well, yes, obviously, in a lot of ways, it's like from stone to writing, papyrus, tablets, scrolls, and now digital. But the idea that if we could put it on DNA for cold storage, the idea that all of that really important stuff, all of it can be stored in a few vials of DNA that are no bigger than a large pill capsule, like a thing that holds like a small bottle,
Yeah.
about the size 2 inches, all metal, sealed. All the world's information is kept in that thing. Now, there'd be multiple copies of it, but that's your answer. Like,
But how do we take that?
well,
And
now
read
we
it.
still need, of course, the sequencing technology, right? That we, like how we sequence the genome of, sheep and people and understand the human genome and mammoths and all that stuff. They sequence. They take each one and they figure out what each one does and how it works, and then they separate them. Again, I'm not a fucking geneticist, but I understand the concept.
Yeah.
So, what is a computer file but a strand of numbers that are arranged in values or meaning to associate them with intended purpose? That's it, right? So we associate the number 9 as whatever, 1001. That's 9. The computer knows it's 9. We just say 9, right? But so that's binary. But when it comes to it, the idea is the same when it comes to and it would be like the same thing for pixels. So if you had a picture, it's basically red, green, and blue associated in a pattern to create the picture, right? Just different shades of those colors that make whatever picture it is in a sequence. So it's really no different than 1001, right? It's just in colors.
So
Now-
what destroys that?
What's that?
What destroys all of that? Faith.
What does?
Faith.
Faith?
My God shits on your math.
Okay. I'm stopping that right now. We're not bringing God
mean,
into
no, but I'm
DNA
saying, like,
sequencing here.
I mean-
because this is science. I'm
I
sorry.
mean, we come up with all this information about how all this stuff works, and people say, nope, God.
Okay, fine. But that's an opinion over fact. I mean, I don't care. That has nothing to do with it. God didn't invent a sequencing machine. We did that. But anyway, yeah, I'm going to steer clear of that one today. But basically, it starts as 4 things. It's encoding, synthesis, storage, and sequencing. So the idea of the encoding is what we just spoke of, all of the binary. And in a lot of ways, DNA, storing stuff on DNA is like, in a very rudimentary way, like quantum computing. How a quantum computer can take a 0, a 1, or both, which makes 2 more possibilities than there were before, right?
And people that have their faith in binary math can't wrap their head around the fact that it goes beyond that.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's also, I think, a lot of this is how most systems work. So to change it that's a lot, changing the infrastructure. But they can understand, maybe they don't get it because I've done this my whole life, so now having to learn this is totally new.
Yeah, I mean,
But
how
the
many
fact that
pe-
you can is one thing.
How many people fight over I agree with string theory and you agree with quantum theory and you fight over it, and it's something that you can't even prove either way. It's like
Okay, I agree.
impossible to even
Sure.
fathom it.
But this is something you can prove. Like, this is tangible. This is like where I was saying, like, you can use binary. We know that works because that's what we've been doing, right? You can use paper because we know that works. But you also, if I write it in English and someone doesn't speak English, it has to be transcribed. Someone has to read it and then translate it, right? But now most of these systems do it automatically. You can You can have something spit out Chinese, Japanese, French, German in a click of a button.
In a
Right?
second.
In a second. So the system knows it, but it's still using binary. The idea that using DNA, because it has the 4 base pairs, it has double the amount of use for those like zeros and ones. So now that's why I said it's similar in a way to quantum computing, where you're using both, you're using a whole bunch. So now just A, G, C, and T for the codes are just associated with numbers, and when you put them together, there's your transcribe. There's your transcribe. Again, I only know this to the surface level of understanding, but it's fucking fascinating the fact that we can do
It
it.
is like if you take a certain creature, like a monkey or something like that, I'm just speaking ignorantly, and you take one switch and flip it down. They don't have a nose; they have a big beak.
Okay,
Or if you
right.
take like another one and it's like having like
It's a
if you-
switchboard.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's,
giant
it's
switchboard.
like having light switches in a room.
From my understanding,
Flick
though,
it
the only,
down.
the only difference though is they don't know if switching that one thing changes 4 others,
Oh yeah, exactly.
and that's
Sure.
what the big thing is. Oh, sure, now you don't have a nose, but you also have this, don't have this, and now this doesn't work.
And dolphin feet.
Right. And again,
Yeah, whatever.
evolution is a billion-year thing to think we can run around with our fingers and flick switches. Now, that I think is where AI will really excel, when it can go through billions of simulations of the outcomes where we would have to physically switch and click each one. This thing did it in minutes, right? Like 10,000 years worth of effort done so that we don't have to. We've gone through all the processes. This is where I think why I think that DNA encoding is so relevant now more, because of the AI revolution, is that it has an actual chance to do this. Like we
Sure.
can
Yeah,
make this work, and if we could just figure out how to make it cheap. Now,
We're on the doorstep of this.
right,
shit.
that's why I'm saying it's like, it'd be like if we talked about this 10 years ago, people would just be like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah, you're an idiot.
Actually, there was an artist, and I couldn't figure out. I couldn't find him when I was researching. His music. He put out an album. He's famous. I can't remember who the fuck it was, but in every album he sold, in that release, he put a DNA coded album on there. So you had the physical album, right? But then there was a DNA thing where if you had a sequencer that could read it, you could play his music from this DNA.
Wow.
Yeah, and this was like 10 years ago. So, and they took, it was news for like a minute, and everyone was like, "All right, yeah, well, I don't have
Of
like
course.
$50,000
that
to
shit's
do
a-
this." So,
Yeah.
right, it's money.
People throw that shit away, and it's a shame.
Well, but even then, it was to me, I think about it as the thinking forward. Like he didn't have to do that. It's a gimmick. No one even cares that you did it. You were selling albums anyway. But the idea that you thought enough to do it, and he was like, "Yeah, might as well." He's like, so now that means that, like, I don't know if it was his blood or if it was synthetic, because now they use synthetic DNA. They create DNA, which is empty, and then fill it with the information they want. You can do that they can grow it, bacteria. I don't exactly know how they do it, but it's synthetic. It's not actual DNA. But it was happening a long time ago.
Do you think they're going to take that information and destroy it so we can't grow?
What do you mean?
We're on the precipice of learning something new, but the people that like own all the information, do you think they're going to be like, you know what?
No.
Fuck them.
I don't think they could. All the information, like I said, because of the web and the internet, all the world's information is literally protected by everyone.
What about the?
Because even if let's say a data farm has all of all of the world's information on it, it doesn't mean it's the only place it is. It's definitely somewhere else. And then a secure farm with the government, and then maybe another one, maybe like a seed farm. You heard about the seed farms, like the one in Alaska or wherever it is, where basically every seed in the world is kept in this one place, just in case of the apocalypse. It's a fucking great idea. And then when we need to, we go in and we take some, we regrow them, we replace them with
no,
new.
we don't. They do.
Well, right, but they're still holding.
We're
the facility.
dead.
It doesn't matter. The fact that it's still there, there's still a chance for life to go on, right? Very similar in a way, because in those seeds is
What about the
what's in
pyramids?
those seeds.
What about the pyramids?
What about the pyramids?
They knew how to build them, but they said they took the same information and destroyed it so we couldn't rebuild them.
But they didn't. That's not true. You keep saying that.
No, I don't
We
keep saying
could build pyramids. We just
No, we can't.
don't.
How?
Yes, we could.
How?
But we don't. It's dumb. We build skyscrapers.
We build
Isn't a
skyscrapers.
skyscraper the equivalent of a pyramid?
No.
It is. It is.
No,
It is.
the,
And
the
there's a-
pyramids
All
are
right.
different.
Semantics. We'll have to agree to disagree, but
No, the
I'm gonna.
pyramids are
You've
different.
said that twice now. I'm gonna have to look that up and
Look-
and form a educated rebuttal.
Go ahead.
I will. But
There
all that
was no
aside,
way that we could rebuild the pyramids. No way. Impossible.
fair enough. But basically, yeah, they synthetically make them. So they take, let's say, a 2-meter strand of synthetic DNA, and then they cut it into segments. And then let's say we put the same thing on 15 segments, right? A copy of each one. And this is one of the problems, right? So that's how it's synthesized. And I couldn't even go into logistics because I'm not a geneticist. I have no fucking idea, right? But then there's storage. So to store a DNA molecule filled with your data, it has to be kept in an isolated from air, humidity, temperature, so that it doesn't degrade. Like sunlight destroys DNA.
Sunlight destroys
Oxygen,
everything.
yeah. I mean, it literally breaks the bonds of DNA, and oxygen oxidizes and can also. So they basically dehydrate the synthesized DNA and they keep it in an airtight small metal capsule. And I wish you could see the small metal capsule to give you an example. It's literally the size of this. What do you call this thing?
A 1/4-inch sack.
All right, so this is a thing that plugs the mic in. It's like 2 inches big. This is what would hold the world's information in DNA. A little capsule with molecules filled in this.
Sure.
But
I
it
have
has to
one.
be kept airtight, no sunlight, in a box. But there's no energy. So think about the server farm that is holding all of the world's information, right? When it could just be stored in a box, in a cool room in a basement somewhere with no sunlight. Instead of pumping energy into keeping the servers going and keeping the information that's there for no one to look at. It's okay. I don't go crazy. I was just giving you the example of the size. But it's just, and it lasts thousands of years. So this is what you had once said before, like what happens, if we lose all that. So if you actually had stuff, you don't think in thousands of years from now, whether it be another race of beings from across the galaxy or future humans, we would definitely have the technology to read DNA because we already can do it now. So if we can do it now, thousands of years from now, if we stored data in DNA, someone would be able to read it.
Right, DNA is the recipe.
Right, that's my point. And if we find out, like eventually we go to different planets and moons and Mars and we find that life is the same elsewhere as it is on this planet, that's even more of an affirmation that we can definitely take this DNA, and that means that somewhere else out there it be possible that someone could read it. I think about, and this is I'm pushing a little bit, but it's just it'd be like putting the world's data, every amount of information in the world. It's something like 7 trillion gigabytes worth of information in a small cardboard box, and just putting it in grandma's basement, right, where it's cool and the temperature's controlled and it doesn't have any sunlight.
Second.
What?
If you go to my basement, you will find. I mean,
And that's pretty much, yeah. And then the last
we're
part
not
of it,
important enough. We don't mean enough.
for what? No, but
We're
the
not
world,
important enough for
but the
our
world
information.
does. So like that is there either way. Again, you don't use the cloud. Of course you use the cloud. Everybody uses the cloud here and there,
So I use a cloud.
which means that one way or another, whether it's important or not, it's there. That's my point. Is that that's not going to stop. Because even if, let's say, you make a TikTok video or you put a Facebook post up, even if you're not saving it on the cloud, Facebook is, and TikTok is, and maybe 60% of it they never go back to, but they could if they wanted. So even if they don't, it's still there, which means automatically it's got to be saved.
I just really hope that in 100 million years from now, someone who's going to look up this video. Hey,
sick.
I was at Wawa today and I got a sub.
What the fuck is a Wawa?
Wawa is a gas station.
So the last part of it is the sequencing, and now this is where it gets a little hinky. The sequencing has been around since the 1970s, right? When mostly done with biology, where we basically started sequencing genomes. We start like remember the Human Genome Project that was big, where we finally decoded the human genome. But we did sheep before that, mice, bacteria, single-celled organisms. Right, we
Growing ears on.
right,
mice
just
and
being
so
able
on.
to manipulate DNA to whatever means necessary for the time. Now, again, let's leave all ethics aside, because of course there's always an ethical dilemma with type things like that.
Of course there is.
But the fact that we could is where it all started. So that was the 1970s. Some processes can be used, synthesize DNA to translate it back into binary. So now this is where you said, well, how do we read it? Well, you have to have a program that reads backwards as well as forwards. Yeah, sure, put it on, but now we have to get it off. This is where everything gets a little hard at this point in time. So let's look at the advantages. The advantages of DNA storage: the ability to store exorbitant amount of information in incredibly small vessels. Right?
How to grow you.
What's that?
How to grow you.
Well, no, I'm not
DNA
talking about
is how to grow you.
right, but I'm not talking about our DNA. I'm talking about synthetically created DNA that we put data onto, right? Which is basically the same thing. So instead of growing
So
you,
making
all
it
this
different.
is all of YouTube's entirety in a tiny molecule, right? But it's the same thing. It's storage, right?
So it's making different creatures.
No, just data, normal data like this podcast or an email you wrote to your cousin or your dog's vet bill that came online. All of that is data, and it's stored somewhere. Now we take that and we put it into DNA as a fucking memory card, basically. That's my point. Because our data, yes, your DNA holds you, right? Now we're not talking about that, but we're talking about DNA as a vessel for information, and they synthetically create it because if you used other DNA, you'd have to take everything out of it to make it empty to put everything in, okay? So the advantage of being able to store a lot in a small amount of space, right? And then time. So it can last thousands of years. Do you think a CD would last thousands of years and still be able to play?
No.
No.
I
mean,
have
a memory
I
card.
have CDs that have went blank.
Right. Yeah. Like just degradation over time. Doesn't matter what environment, air,
And
sunlight,
I miss
all kinds of
I'm
stuff.
like, I really wish I could
Sure.
listen.
But now we have digital. So even if you didn't have that, you would have, let's say, that same song and 3 different devices. So it can never degrade. But even that cell phone would eventually degrade. But DNA takes thousands and thousands of years to degrade. So therefore, it is a way to keep cold storage items for thousands of years without ever having to.
I'm gonna last a while.
So,
Rob McCarthy.
That's the second thing. And then the last thing would be no energy to store it. Like I said, instead of a server farm, you put it in this little tiny cylindrical metal thing that's air sealed and kept away from sunlight in a box, and you put it away. And now for thousands of years, if you ever needed it, it's there. But if you turn the computer off, you can't access your data.
Because it gets destroyed.
Well, no, it doesn't get destroyed, but you'd need to put energy in for you to get it out. The point of the DNA that I love is that it's there. You put it in a box. Now, to extract it, I would need to get energy, but holding it and accessing
But what
it
keeps
doesn't.
it alive?
It's not. It's just DNA. It's not alive. This is the thing. DNA is not technically alive. It's a vessel. It's synthetic. It's not an actual organism. It's just the DNA. It's a vessel. It's a
like
micro.
a newspaper with shit written on it.
Sure, basically, yeah. It just microscopically in a nucleus of a cell that's not, and they dehydrate it. That's what I said. So they it's like when they dehydrate
A banana. You have to
no,
add
or
water to it
when they
to-
dehydrate tardigrades and they send them to space and then they rehydrate them
I love
back to
tardigrades.
life.
Do you know what it's called when you
Water
put,
bears or whatever.
Do you know what it's called when you put water into a tardigrade and make it come back to life?
I have no idea.
A retardigrade. I'm sorry.
It's okay. So those are the positives, but again, you have to go to the reality of things, which is fine because the reality is how we press forward. The
Okay,
obstacles.
this is interesting. I'm liking this.
It's fine. I hope so. I mean, I hope somebody finds it interesting, or at least goes, huh? And then 5 years, 10
Yeah,
years
that's
down the
what
line,
I'm going,
you hear
okay,
about it and you
okay.
go, holy fucking shit, it did happen.
I would love to disagree with you, but okay, but you're making sense.
Well, you can. I mean, there's plenty of things you can still say. Well, this way's better. Well, it actually is better. The way we do it right now is the better way. It
hey,
is.
Dave, do you know you're the biggest retardigrade ever met?
I'm the most dehydrated retardigrade ever.
Hey, get this guy a glass of water, please.
So, first, as of now, reading the files, errors occur, so they have to transcribe multiple copies and then check each one to make sure it's right. So it'd be like if you opened an email, read it, and then have to open up 3 more of the same emails to make sure it's right.
But you can't
Kind of
do
redundant. Well, at this point, it's because it's so infantile in the state of where we want it to be that's the way they have to do it. Right.
But that's why we get old, because they can't read our information and make it perfect again.
Right.
So
but also,
they make mistakes. And
Also
we get
because
old.
parts of it degrade biologically.
right.
This is something synthetic, so it doesn't degrade in itself, but the process in reading it is not, at this point, let's say, good enough. So they have to have redundancies. Okay. Second, it's far too slow. At this point, let's say in this year, it takes 2 minutes to write a single nucleo base, which would basically be 1 billion times slower than traditional computing. That's ridiculous. And literally at that point, people stop listening. They're like, okay,
Yeah, they
all
get
right,
bored.
this is absolutely useless. Even if you can do it, it's
Hey,
useless.
guys, keep listening.
But, and the cost. So here's the third bad part. It's super expensive. Let's say right now it costs about $1,000 per megabyte to read. Now that's to encode. So I have the information on this DNA, and I have this machine, and to read 1 megabyte, it costs $1,000. But right now, so that's 2024.
To make who? An idiot?
No, to read the information off of the DNA.
But they might be an idiot.
No, it's the computer. Well, I guess the computer would be an idiot compared to computers 5 years from now. Yeah, that computer would go, "You're an idiot. I could read that freaking in a second." So now, the optimistic part is where, in what they would, let's say, estimate 5 years, with the current trend of progression in the research and development that they do in this field, they're looking at around, they say 1 kilobyte per second, right? Estimated to the future would be $1 per gig. So you just went from $1,000 for 1 fucking megabyte within 5 to 8 years, $1 for a gig. And a gig is about you downloading a movie in standard vision, right? Like not like HD or something.
Maybe half of it.
Right, or something like that. But or for me, it would be like a small video game, right? A tiny little thing.
Ryan Reynolds. He's so handsome. Dave, don't judge me.
But with the growth of more companies and just basically the way things work, it's the example of space flight. Elon Musk and his rockets, right? He landed them, so it's cheaper for them to send things up, right? Because we don't throw them away. But as time goes on, he builds more and more rockets. He gets more and more customers. The price goes down and down. It's the same, literally the same concept. How much was a cell phone when they first came out?
Okay, well, when a cell phone first came out, who had one? A lawyer, a doctor, and
Right.
they had it around their shoulder.
Sure, it was this
and
big
they were
thing.
walking down the staircase
Yeah.
of the, and
Perfect
it was like
example.
$500 a minute. It was like
Right.
stupid.
But then you fast forward 10 years, and it got better, smaller, cheaper, and faster. And then 10 years. Now it's like homeless people have fucking phones.
Yeah, now I
I
kick.
don't know who they call them, but they got phones. Now,
Now they're calling lawyers.
yeah.
I kick a lawyer in the crotch. I'm like, hey, how do you like this? Boom.
But they imagine that within 5 to 8 years, if the technology proceeds at the pace that it's going, that they'd be able to basically download. It would be the equivalent of a basic internet connection. So you could pull information off of DNA at the same speed of you asking Google why my farts smell like asparagus. You
I
get the
can
same
tell
answer.
you that. Do you want to know why your farts smell like asparagus?
I went with the weirdest thing I could possibly think of. I probably could have went further.
Because you ate asparagus.
You
and
are
they-
what you eat.
They traverse through your little bowels and all of a sudden, oh shit, what's that? kind of smells like asparagus. No, do you know what? Why does your pee smell like asparagus?
Well, I told you. Remember, I
Yeah,
looked it
I
up. I
know,
had
I
to.
know.
I had no choice.
Because the
Some
chemical.
people don't process the sulfur in the asparagus the same way, so it gets excreted through your urine, which you're actually losing that part. But some people don't. That I think is fascinating.
Hold on a second.
A whole nother conversation, but
Hold on a second. I had to pee.
oh god,
Oh.
I think
No.
he's wearing an adult diaper. It'll all
It's
depend.
not. It's not a diaper.
It'll all
baby.
depend.
It's a sniper.
On-
It's a smelling diaper.
So, to end it, I didn't want to spend all night on it. I just kind of wanted to touch base with a few things because I found it fascinating. I was literally, and I was following this for a few years, but not as in detail. But it's funny. The closer you get to the technology, the more serious things get, and it's so exponential. It's almost like the Moore's law of science, to where like
Yeah, of
we hit a threshold, and then all of a sudden the technology changes, and oh my God, we're allowed to do this much more, and it jumps off the fucking graph, and you tend to start paying attention to it because you're like, wow, it actually has real world application. I mean, even if it's just for cold data, like you said. Think about this. Remember, I don't remember what spacecraft it was. Remember the Golden Record?
Yes, it was.
It was part of, I don't know if it was part of SETI or Carl Sagan. They sent up that spacecraft to search the space, and they sent up a golden record. And on that record was like pictures and human history and audio recordings and biology and zoology and all kind. They crammed all this shit onto a fucking record. I think we spoke about it once. And then you got to go like this. Then you got to go, okay, so aliens find this spacecraft.
They won't. They'll never find.
Oh, okay. Okay, I know that. But let's say they
Never.
do. Let's say they do. Do they have a record player? Do they even know what a fucking record is? So now they have to figure out how to play this thing. Like, okay, there's probably something on there, but we don't know how to get it out, right? Now, you like to hope that they're incredibly intelligent beings who traveled across the galaxy. They probably fucking figure it out, right? But what if it was on DNA? If DNA is so ubiquitous throughout the galaxy, and all life is created from this, maybe other ways, but mainly, then they would be able to understand how to extract that information. So instead of sending a golden record, you send up a vial of synthetic DNA with whatever message you want on it that will last thousands of years without degradation, that could be lost in the cosmos and floating through space until hopefully some benevolent extraterrestrial species finds it and not some,
It would take
warmongering
hundreds
type.
of thousands of years.
All that aside, I'm just looking at possibilities to the use of DNA storage. Because to us, it doesn't mean anything. We have a phone, we have a hard drive. I can buy a 5 terabyte hard drive, which would hold everything that I'd ever need for the next 20 years of my life, right, for like $180. But the world goes through so much data. I mean, when you look up the numbers of what information is passed back and forth on a daily basis, it's astounding. It's exponential to the point of like the number just goes off the, like when it's on a screen, like there's no end to the number.
What language do you send it?
It doesn't even matter. There's a number. I'm talking about amount of things that are sent back and forth. It gets ridiculous. But yeah, that's where I was going with that. So DNA storage. I don't know. Does anybody else care about that out there? Listeners, does anybody heard anything like, is this something you would have even fathoming existing, let alone being of use to you within 5 years? Maybe not you, but what if, oh man, now I start to think on the science fiction level. What if like all of our information, like you talk about retinal scans or thumbprints, like, or chips in the hand. Remember, I've always said I'd be the first one to get a chip. And if I didn't have to carry around a wallet, an ID, my medical records, and all I had to do was fucking scan my hand, I'm okay with that. I don't have an issue. I'm also not a criminal. I have nothing to hide. I'm kind of boring, right? But it would save me a lot of effort. Oh, I left my driver's license in the car. Oh, shit, I don't have my medical records. Oh, here, just scan this. Dude, what if you had all your information in your blood? They find you're a John Doe. You'd never be a John Doe. They would take your blood. They would run it through a synthesizer.
What if your name was John Doe?
Well, then they would know that your name was John Doe, and there would be background to it. Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. I just think the application can go sinister. It can also definitely stay pretty neutralic and,
Right.
and have use for the future. But
I'm not a religious guy, but
I don't think it has anything to do with
I
religion.
reserve
This is
the
all
right.
science. This was a science-based episode. I don't want to bring religion in because there's no fact in, there's no reason to. But
well,
that's all. Yeah. So what do you think of DNA storage, Robert? You look a little he's glazed over, folks. He's a little glazed.
DNA. If I could use the word DNA in a sentence, it would be does not associate.
It doesn't mean dinonucleic acid.
Deoxyribonucleic acid.
Oh, that's what it is. Deoxyribonucleic
RNA
acid.
ribonucleic acid is
This is why we say DNA.
they're the cooks.
So
I'll
confusing.
take your DNA and I'll throw it in the kitchen.
I don't know. I just think, will there be a time in let's say 10 years where we're like, oh yeah, that's why. Well, how did they do things before? It's like rotary phones. Like when you try to show a kid, I know, I tell her all the time, and like I show, look at the rotary phone. She's like, I know, Daddy, you've told me. And I'm like, I know, but you understand. Like, look, this is what you had to do, and you press it and it turns. Right? Like, you just think now, isn't that how we always did it? Like, we don't think that far
Dave,
back.
I told you how I called you on the phone when I landed in the airport. When I pushed the button, pop, 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 pop.
Oh yeah, you use the receiver.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Just interrupted the signal.
Well, no, I think that
And the fucking guy from the taxi cab came running in. What are you doing? I'm like, I'm talking to my friend. No, you're not. That's impossible. I'm like, yeah, I'm just going like this.
That's impossible. I
I
believe in God. Science isn't real. Oh my God.
He's that guy. I'm in my taxi cab. I'm like, well, go back to your taxi cab and take a crap
hold on.
in
I'm
your
sorry.
console.
What's a
you dirty-
taxi cab?
A
You mean
taxi-
Uber?
Mm-hmm.
A Lyft? Oh, okay.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Go back far enough or forward enough, and eventually we're just gonna go. Wait, what is that? What are we? Oh, that.
A
how they did
bus?
things? Like before a car. Like how did people? Like when a kid asks, and I love it. They'll ask honestly, like, how did they do stuff before cars? You mean a horse and buggy? A horse and a cart? You mean a wheelbarrow? You mean they carried stuff? And then that's it. You go back far enough, we just tend to forget that that's how things were done because that's all we could do. And I think that's where I hold the optimism, because if there was no optimism and futurism, we'd still be having a horse and buggy.
That's right.
It wouldn't be just the Amish community in fucking Pennsylvania with those 18 people that live in the community and have no car and one cell phone. And it's okay.
Yeah, like when I was in school, I read a book called The Grapes of Wrath.
Okay.
I was like
I've
20
heard of that, but I
people.
don't think I've read
Like
it.
20 people before me, were like going across the country in a horse and carriage to go to California.
I mean, dude,
And
that's it.
Grandma died, and what did they do when Grandma died? They just threw off the back of the carriage and
Or they never left. Like there were those times even before that.
no,
where
they just
like,
dug a little thing. They put a cross, put her hat on top of it.
oh, what you mean when they die along the way?
yeah. Put a little hat. There's Grandma.
Kind of like Vacation, one of those vacation movies when the grandmother died and they just put her on the trunk on the roof, wrapped up.
And then the next person is like, "Holy shit! I better keep breathing, otherwise I'm gonna have a hat."
Yeah. Fucking Oregon Trail. So,
Oh yeah, the Oregon Trail. That's right.
well, anyway, I think I've beaten this rug down to enough dust.
Biting it down.
All right, I hope you guys enjoyed my scientific chat about DNA storage and our future of cramming all of the world's knowledge into a fucking DNA nuclei.
That's right. And my idiotic rant that made probably no sense, but it did make a little bit of sense.
It's okay. It's fine. Look, man,
Whatever.
I
I don't care. Whatever.
you don't have to.
You know,
care.
I don't know what
I
the
don't
hell I'm
understand
talking
it
about.
all. I love the idea that there are lots of people that do understand it enough to make it tangible.
And do you know what makes
Make
me
it
happy?
real.
When people write emails and say, "Hey, you know what, Rob? You have no idea what the hell you're talking about." Good, I'll read every one of them.
Oh, yeah, man. Infamy, famous, same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Better to be
That's all
wrong
I got.
and then be right than
That's
be
all
wrong
I
and
got
stay
to
wrong.
say about that.
Yeah, right. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening to A Lifetime of Conversations this week. You can always check us out on A Lifetime of Conversations at YouTube, as well as Spotify and all other platforms. And if you'd like to leave a comment, please, you're more than welcome. We love to hear it. And want to hear something for us to talk about? Got something that you want us to talk about? Please let us know.